Start it, Manju.
Start here.
Okay, Manju. Manju, you have to unmute, Manju. You have to unmute.
Manju, unmute.
Start PM, sir.
Right.
Okay, welcome everyone to the meeting. Last month we didn't have a meeting due to technical reasons. Technical reasons being a slight bit of Alzheimer's, but so otherwise it was okay. So anyway, without further ado, I think we'll go. Today we have.
Can I make a small request actually? Whoever is logging in, can you please use your own name at least for this meeting? Because otherwise it's difficult to keep track of who is logging in.
So 8BC, 8B39394. Please rename.
Or can you please unmute and identify yourself? Because I need the attendance.
Rename as unknown for time being. So that you can know, you make yourself known. Yeah. So anyway, so today we have two discussions. One is a case report by our PG, Dr. Sean. But first of all, we'll have a talk by our newest member of our Trivandrum Nephrology Club. So Dr. Shabna Suleiman. Shabna is actually originally from Palakkad. She did her schooling in Palakkad and Thrissur. And then she did her MBBS at JIPMER Pondicherry. And then did her MD and DM at PGI Chandigarh. So she's qualified from probably the Ivy Leagues of nephrology in India. So we have a lot of expectations from her. She's not only, she has got other talents also. She plays violin and she even has an excellent handwriting, which is not good news for doctors actually. So anyway, with all that, without further ado, she's going to talk about a very complex topic, kidney transplantation in myeloma. So our own views of kidney transplant myelomas, don't do it. But I think Shabna is here to change that. So over to Shabna and welcome.
Sir, shall I share my screen, sir?
Yes, please.
Is it visible?
Yes, yes.
You must speak up, huh? Because your voice is a little.
Good evening to all. I thank you, sir, for this introduction, which is slightly unexpected. So I'm here to, I chose this topic of kidney transplantation in myeloma in view of the burden of kidney disease of myeloma and the up and coming therapies that have greatly improved the survival of with ESRD. Am I audible?
Yeah, you have to speak up a little bit more.
Yes, sir.
Then you can ask the other people to unmute.
Starting with our topic, so this is in brief about the introduction about multiple myeloma. As we all know, is a clonal plasma cell disorder which accounts for about 10% of the hematological malignancies, and with a mean age of presentation of more than 50 years, usually seen in the elderly age group. And it is diagnosed by the International Myeloma Working Group diagnostic criteria, which defines myeloma based on the bone marrow showing more than or equal to 10% plasma cells and or biopsy proven extramedullary plasmacytoma, and one of the following myeloma defining events, which may either be the CRAB criteria as we know it, or any of the following biomarkers of malignancy, which is defined as the bone marrow plasma cell showing more than or equal to 60% plasma cells, the SFLCA showing involved by uninvolved serum free light chains more than or equal to 100, and MRI showing at least one, more than one lytic lesion. It can cause renal dysfunction by both paraprotein and non-paraprotein related causes. The systemic causes of the non-paraprotein related causes include dehydration, infections, the drug-induced, the bisphosphonate related, and the DC medications and hypercalcemia. And the paraprotein related causes can affect the glomerular compartment or the tubular compartment. And these are the various, as we all know, the various, manifestations of myeloma. So the mechanism of nephrotoxicity includes the immunoglobulins which are being deposited, either deposited causing which are deposited in an organized fashion, as in the amyloidosis, the immunotactic glomerulopathy, or the fibrillary.
Just a minute,
Excuse
Shabna.
me, excuse me, Dr. Shabna.
Yes, sir.
Would you come closer to the laptop, because I don't think you are very audible.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Better, but still a little low.
Okay, I'll speak up. I'll speak up.
Okay, thank you.
So the deposition of immunoglobulins can be in the form of organized or unorganized deposits causing the various manifestations as we know it, or either can be in the form of complement activation causing C3 glomerulopathy, and can also cause crystal globulinic GN as well as crystal globulin induced nephropathy. So coming to the proper, why are we discussing this topic is because of the sheer burden of kidney disease, or sheer burden of myeloma causing kidney disease. So the myeloma is responsible for about, in myeloma, about 1/4 of the patients have renal dysfunction at diagnosis, and about half of the patients have renal dysfunction at some point during the course of the illness. So this almost explains the sheer magnitude of patients having myeloma and renal dysfunction. And up to more than 10% of the patients have severe renal dysfunction causing requiring dialysis. And as we all know, as I will be mentioning later on, that hemodialysis in multiple myeloma is associated with a very much reduced overall survival. And in the event of with newer chemotherapeutic drugs that have developed, which has greatly increased the patients are living longer because of the improved chemotherapeutic drugs that causes more remission. And thus, because patients are living longer, they are living with more end organ effects of the disease, such as renal insufficiency, and which may is advanced to end stage renal disease. Now the question arises whether kidney transplantation in multiple myeloma would be advantageous in the modern era or not. So this is not a simple question, and therefore the answer is also not very simple. And it is we think that the reality that the that some select, those is a the my I would be going through a few studies, and taking you to try to convince you to the fact that a few select patients are greatly benefit with renal transplantation. And therefore we should indeed consider them for renal transplantation of all patients with based on the patient criteria. So multiple myeloma, renal transplantation multiple myeloma was avoided traditionally because myeloma per se is a immunosuppressed condition, and the immunosuppressive therapy of renal transplantation added to it would greatly increase the risk of infections and also malignancy progression. Apart from this, there is also always the worry about the chances of relapse and causing with the paraprotein causing damage to the new graft. So it is always, it is a it is a natural doubt that we have, is that is it worth giving up a kidney for a myeloma patient who is anyway not going to live well. So in answer, I would like to present this data by the ANZATA registry. So which shows the outcome in the ESRD patients on myeloma. So they have with the new advent of new drugs, several new drugs that have been approved for the treatment of myeloma, the 1-year survival, which was very dismal, it was about only 56% in 1999, has increased to 70%. But when we compare it to the patients who are surviving on dialysis from non-myeloma related ESRD causes, we find that it is still, the survival is lesser. So but I would like to before I would like to give a disclaimer that what this data that we are presenting is actually has a bias, because it is based on the retrospective case series and case reports, and there is a in general a tendency not to report the negative negative outcome. So that bias is always there. So in view of that, I would like to give the disclaimer that this might not be 100% reliable, but it all shows that even though the outcome has improved when compared to 1999, they still have a very poor prognosis, and this prognosis is worse than patients who are surviving on dialysis from non myeloma related causes. So this it is from an article which is published in CJASIN, which shows that patients of 1 year survival of patients on myeloma is only 42%, and it and the death increases to about 82% at 8 years. So that the survival rate is actually dismal in patients on dialysis, and this survival rate is death rate is almost twice as a patient of other causes. So, considering the poor outcome with hemodialysis in patients with multiple myeloma, transplantation should be offered. So, so in this new era, when the in this new era of very effective drugs, the median survival also has increased to less than 3 years to about 6.5 to 8 years in 2014. And also the treatment related mortality has also reduced from 13% to 5.6%. So there are now this slide shows the various drugs that are available. We have plenty of drugs for the treatment of multiple myeloma. So these are the 4 drugs which have been traditionally used. Then there are these proteasome inhibitors, which is now the backbone of myeloma chemotherapeutic regimen, which was introduced in around in the early 2000s, and the newer the monoclonal antibodies along with the targeted therapies. So since and also the since 2015, the approval of the anti-CD38 antibodies, the daratumumab and the isatuximab, they have shown impressive impact in advancing the progression-free survival in multiple myeloma patients. And overall, this is good news, and it is almost there are a lot of hemato-oncologists who say that multiple myeloma is in fact a curable disease. So there we can give various combinations of these drugs, and it is either the standard norm is to give a triplet based chemotherapeutic drug followed by ESCT. So there are various combinations that can be given. And and this also this diagram shows the survival rate that has consistently shown an improvement in the trends, and these are the various chemotherapeutic agents which have come up in a big way since 2005. There is a bortezomib which came up in 2005 2004, and then there are the second line chemotherapeutic drugs which that carfilzomib and pomalidomide, which came in 2013-14, and the monoclonal antibodies which have come up after 2015. No, with these chemotherapeutic, in any treatment of multiple myeloma, the treatment aim would be to achieve a deeper remission. That is the first treatment goal, and and the best way to achieve this is to go for a high dose chemotherapy followed by a stem cell rescue, which may be which most of the times is the autologous stem cell transplantation. So this is treatment algorithm which is in from a review article published in Nature Reviews by the one of the pioneers in multiple myeloma, Vincent Rajkumar and Shaji Kumar. So before treating any patient of multiple myeloma, we have to first, on diagnosis, we have to risk stratify the patient who if they are having a standard risk or an intermediate or a high risk, and this is based on the molecular cytogenetics, and if they have any one of the mentioned translocations. And secondly, we have to see if they are transplant ineligible or transplant eligible. So in patients who are transplant ineligible, basically the treatment will be to give chemotherapeutic the induction therapy for 12 months and followed by maintenance chemotherapy. So in patients who are transplant eligible, would be first we have to give 4 to 6 cycles of chemotherapy, collect the stem cells, and then followed by ASCT for consolidation of remission. This is the algorithm for the management of multiple myeloma. So from here, it's clear that after chemotherapeutic giving chemotherapeutic regimen, the consolidation of autologous stem cell transplantation is advised almost universally in all transplant eligible patients. So, coming to the problems in ASCT in patients who have renal dysfunction. So usually CKD or ESRD was considered as a contraindication for ASAD traditionally because of the following issues, complications associated with the conditioning regimens. For example, these conditioning regimens had to be given. They caused toxicities in the form of cytopenias and infections. So these very high, and there was an unacceptably high risk of mortality and morbidity because of the infectious complications, and also renal dysfunction. There is a need to adjust the dose of the drugs who have renal clearance, causing if the patients were given overdosed, there would be increased risk of toxicities, including mucositis, cytopenias, increased infections, and underdosing would lead to reduced response rates. And there was also increased risk of infections and malignancies associated with increased immunosuppression, and also there would be chemotherapy associated with AKI and worsening of renal dysfunction. So in general, it was considered that the raised serum creatinine was considered as a poor marker for outcome in ASCT, and that is why it was considered that renal dysfunction is considered as a high risk for doing a stem cell transplant. However, but why is the current guidelines advising ASCT for remission consolidation is because of that because of the sheer fact that it causes a deeper remission and increases the remission in myeloma. So by remission, so this we can understand with the help of this upside down iceberg. So when multiple myeloma is diagnosed, we have this like a lot of cells, about 10 raised to 12 if we consider, and with various degrees of response rates that are achieved with the chemotherapeutic regimen, the number of cells come down. But even when the patient is in CR and bone marrow is showing less than 5% plasma cells, we tend to get satisfied because we think that the patient is in remission, she's in complete remission. Then then we can slowly switch to the maintenance chemotherapy. So but the issue is that even when the patient is in CR, the number of cells is maybe as high as 10 raised to 9 cells because of the iceberg that is immersed and we're not able to see it. So this brings into the new concept of measurable residual disease, which is advised to make all the clinical decisions, and it is the most reliable response marker. So the measurable residual disease, which can be it can be measured with a variety of techniques, which is mentioned in the International Myeloma Working Group. It can be by bone marrow flow cytometry, and I won't go into the in this discussion. So but it helps us to stratify the patients who have reduced measurable residual disease. If it is MRD positive, then the patients like with the we can like if it is we can if it is MRD negative, then continuing the treatment would mean that we are exposing the patients to more toxic, expensive, unnecessary therapy. And if the patient is MRD positive, then we are giving and we are thinking that the patient is in remission and reducing the chemotherapy, then we would be giving maintenance chemotherapy to a drug whose actually disease is progressing. So the measurement of measurable residual disease is very important and is required in the treatment of myeloma. So these are the various diagnostic features, response criteria, which are laid down by the IMW working group. And for the requirement for ASCT is a patient should be either in VGPR, that is very good partial remission, or complete remission, at least in this degree of remission for them to be transplanted. So this is for the ASCT. The criteria for renal transplant is not laid down in the guidelines, but it is a general consensus that the same criteria holds true for renal transplant as well. That is, the patient should be either in VGPR or CR for a patient to undergo multiple myeloma. So the the patient it is hello, can you am I audible?
Yes, yes, you're audible. Yes, please carry on.
Yes, sir. So it is a well-known fact that the deeper the remission is, that is a patient with MRD negative, that increase the chances of progression-free survival and the overall survival. So this trial, which is paper which was published in NEJM in 2014, it compares the patients who have undergone stem cell transplantation vis-a-vis the patients who were continued on chemotherapy, and they've shown that the patients, they have a significantly higher progression-free survival, overall survival, and also the reduced risk of relapse, although there was a higher rate of infections. So similar data was available on another study which was published in 2015, which showed increased survival, progression-free survival, overall survival, and but also increased risk of infections. So concluding that the high dose melphalan and ACT, it remains the preferred option in transplant eligible patients with multiple myeloma. So coming to ACT, the toxicity of ACT. So this paper, it compared the toxicity of stem cell transplantation in two era. So it compared the toxicity and survival outcomes of 96 multiple myeloma patients with renal insufficiency undergoing stem cell transplant in two eras. In the old era, that is 1998 to 2007, and compared it with 2008 to 2016 era, and they found that there was a significantly more higher grade of toxicities in the older era, including high grade electrolyte abnormalities, mucositis, delirium, and bleeding. And patients transplanted more recently had significantly higher overall survival rate, and as well as increased risk of deeper remission, that is more than or equal to VGPR. The progression survival rate was also higher, and there was increased reduced transplant related mortality in patients. So summarizing, we can from this come to a conclusion that the stem cell transplant used to be associated with a very high toxicity in the earlier era, but with the advent of, with the introduction of the newer therapeutic chemotherapeutic agents, the ACT toxicities have reduced and the survival is also higher. So coming to kidney transplantation in multiple myeloma, there is the dilemma in the minds of most nephrologists is always, if I transplant my patient, will I be successful? So also, what is the point at which I should transplant my patients? So there are three options. Either we can give chemotherapeutic drugs, achieve remission, do a kidney transplantation, and then go for a bone marrow transplantation after kidney transplantation. Second option would be to give chemotherapy, do an ACT stem cell transplant for consolidation of the remission, achieve a very good VGPR or a CR, and then do a renal transplantation. And the third option would be if you have a donor who can give both a kidney as well as bone marrow. That is a simultaneous bone marrow and allogenic stem cell transplantation. That would be a third option from a HLA matched donor. However, the availability of that is very less. Therefore, only few case reports are available. But among the other two options, doing a kidney transplantation after stem cell transplantation is associated with reduced risk of infection. So that is what is advised. So kidney transplantation success depends on choosing the right recipient, the right timing, as well as the correct treatment protocol. So what is meant by the correct recipient? So correct recipient is defined by the after risk stratification myeloma based on the high risk cytogenetics. If they are having the translocation and the deletion, which is considered as high risk, they are belong to the high risk strategy, high risk, and some people also categorize them as standard risk, intermediate risk, and high risk. And it's basically because in patients with standard risk, they are associated with a median survival of more than 10 years, intermediate risk of 7 years, and high risk means they have a survival of only 3 years. So in a patient with a high risk, it might not be worthwhile to transplant this patient, and so because they do not respond to treatment, they cannot attain the required degree of remission, and therefore have a high risk of recurrence as well as reduced survival. So we would so that would be an inappropriate patient to consider transplant in. So this is only if we choose and give the appropriate regimen. So the next method is next important point is to choose the correct timing. What is the correct timing in which you should consider transplant? That is, how long after the patient has attained remission should be considered renal transplantation. So before that, sorry. So too early means there is increased risk of relapse, and too late means that there is associated with dialysis related morbidity and mortality. So what is a sweet spot in these kind of patients? So this correct timing actually depends on the risk. So if patient is having standard risk and MRD negative, that means that you can transplant it at least after a waiting period of at least 6 months. And if it's very high risk and MRD is positive, that means you should probably not go or wait for at least 12 months. So the standard risk patient who is MRD positive or negative means you have to the sweet spot would be somewhere in between 6 to 12 months. This, however, is not based on any guidelines. This is based on some expert opinion, and therefore it is various there is a difference of opinion between experts also. So this is based on the observation by Vincent Rajkumar, who's one of the pioneers in myeloma. He has suggested a waiting period of about 12 months. However, I'm going to give you more data where they have suggested a different waiting period. So in this manuscript that was published in 2020, which is one of the biggest, actually is one of the most extensive reviews of kidney transplantation in myeloma, and it is in this they have reviewed and they have found almost about 36 patients who have undergone myeloma, and they have reviewed, and they have found that about 1/3 of the patient of myeloma had relapse, and most of the relapse happen in less than 1 year post transplant, and it is suggestive of either high risk disease or poor multiple myeloma control pre transplant. There were not much adverse effects with respect to post transplant immunosuppressive therapy, and they found that the greater time to multiple myeloma treatment to transplant, there was a lower rate of relapse. However, this was not significant, and they found that in the long term, in the setting of prolonged long term overall survival due to the use of newer immunotherapeutic agents in the treatment of myeloma, the patients with myeloma and advanced kidney disease may benefit from more aggressive treatment in the form of renal transplantation. And then they found that the median duration between kidney transplant, between the treatment of myeloma and the kidney transplant was shorter in those patients who relapsed. That is, that is almost the median duration in patients who relapsed was about 23 months, vis-a-vis the number of patients who did not relapse, that is about 48 months. And they considered that, so they advised for longer time to transplant in even in patients who were having standard risk. So this is the demographic profile of patients who in this study. They have taken almost 36 patients, and in this it is worthwhile to notice that the depleting agents they have used, they have like depleting agents were very less. Only 4 patients out of the received ATG, and most of the patients received either no induction or interleukin 2 blockade. And also in the outcomes, about 1/3 relapsed, and there were at 11 deaths, and newer malignancies 3 patients. So they have advised for a more conservative estimated waiting time to transplant, that is about 2 years from either CR or VGPR. But they have also put a disclaimer that the optimal waiting time is unclear at this point. This goes on to suggest that the high risk patients should not undergo transplant in view of poor prognosis, and further studies are required to predict factors that predict kidney transplant outcomes. So the majority of the deaths that happened during in these patients were not because of myeloma per se, but were because of sepsis, cardiac disease, or de novo malignancy. So this is a reminder that even in patients with adequate control of myeloma, the patients are still significantly immunocompromised. And most of these patients are elderly and have many other comorbidities in the form of hypertension, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, that places them the high risk for non-myeloma related morbidity and mortality. So then, and the number of prior chemotherapy cycles, the multiple myeloma status at diagnosis, the time of kidney transplantation, as well as the what kind of preconditioning regimen was given, what was the dose of the regimen, all contribute to the immunosuppressed status of these patients. So we need to, so this is the our data on the, we had done a review of all the multiple myeloma patients who had received bortezomib based chemotherapy followed by ASCT prior to kidney transplantation. And we found that this number to be around 14. Actually, we had our inclusion and exclusion criteria were more stringent. That's why the reduced numbers. And then this is the summary, which included about 8 studies, that is 14 patients, which included mostly case reports and case series, which are fitting the inclusion criteria. About 75% of the patients had kappa chain paraprotein, and median time to kidney transplant in this in our study was 27.7 months. The median creatinine and follow-up was 1.25. 2 patients had rejection. One had a graft loss because of mixed rejection, and the other one had TCMR, which is most likely lenalidomide induced. Since it is a immunomodulatory drug, it can increase the chances of rejection. The 3 patients had relapse of myeloma, out of which subsequently 1 attained remission with second-line chemotherapy. So there were also severe infections in 6 patients, which were bacterial pneumonia, CMV, pyelonephritis, or severe oropharyngeal mucositis and gram-negative sepsis following either ASCT or kidney transplantation. And there was no mortality in the cohort studied. So from this, I would the following take. I would like to summarize my data in the following points. While keeping in so kidney transplant after ASCT is relatively safe and is associated with a excellent 1-year overall survival and progression-free survival. However, the key factor in success is patient selection, and the best recipient is a standard risk patient with post ASCT with MRD negative status. A waiting time of 6 to 12 months, depending on the risk profile, is essential, and bortezomib-based chemotherapy and regular post-transplant monitoring is needed. The HLA identical allogenic stem cell transplant and kidney transplant, same donor, is also promising, and we should always involve the patient in shared decision making. However, larger clinical trial is required, and we should always keep in mind the factors such as the previous chemotherapeutic regimen, because it increases the risk of malignancy, the net state of immunosuppression of the patient, the cytogenetic risk, the comorbidities, and the response to chemotherapy, and the availability of a donor who may be providing both the allogenic stem cells as well as the kidney. So and also that this is a teamwork with the involvement of the patient, the hemato-oncologist, and the nephrologist. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shabna. That was a very fascinating journey into the myeloma conundrum and how we can plan a transplant into a patient with myeloma. I think it was a very good summary of data and excellent data of your own. And most of its information is new to most of us. So we all learned a lot from that. So thank you very much. So one thing I'd like to ask you is, do you recommend that once the patient has a low MRD and probably has achieved complete disease remission and undergone allogenic stem cell transplant also, and then you do a kidney transplant, do you continue anti-myeloma therapy after kidney transplant from bortezomib?
Yes.
Or would you prefer something like a newer agent like daratumumab or something like that, which may be a much more broad spectrum agent?
Yes, sir. In the most of the data that we had seen, daratumumab, only 1 or 2 patients had received daratumumab, because most of the patients, they receive monoclonal antibody. One thing, these are all very new drugs, and since transplantation is also predominantly done in the last 5 years or so, so this is a changing trend. And also daratumumab is only 1 or 2 patients had received daratumumab. So they have most of the studies, the experts have advised maintaining the patient on bortezomib rather than lenalidomide because of the associated risk of rejection with the immunomodulatory drugs. So yes, even in the previous, even in PGI, when we did transplant of these patients, we actually burnt our fingers by using lenalidomide. The patient had TCMR, after which we changed to bortezomib-based chemotherapy, and he is on bortezomib maintenance and doing well.
Another point, have you used immune checkpoint inhibitors anytime? Because those can be open up a Pandora's box once you do the transplant.
I have no experience.
Any questions? Anyone? Any comments?
No, just a question about the immunosuppression post-transplant. Like, how do you modify immunosuppression? Would you keep it at a attack level at a very low level or low level steroids? So what was your protocol? And other observation was regarding the severe infections. I think you mentioned 6 out of 14 had severe infections. And I think you're fortunate that you didn't lose any patient, but that is something that I would believe that would be a major issue post-transplant.
So coming to your first question, most of these patients, they were continued on the normal triple drug immunosuppressive therapy with the CNI, the MMF, and the steroids. Along with that, they were on bortezomib maintenance. And these bortezomib, as I've shown in my table, bortezomib maintenance was given out of the 14 patients, only 6 were on bortezomib maintenance, and these were not our data. This was a review of all the data that is published. This is we have done a transplant of only 1 patient similar. So ours was a case report, but the review is of all the data that are published so far. And with respect to the severe infections, yes, 6 out of 12, but that was post. I have counted post stem cell transplant infections as well as kidney transplant infections. They had severe like these infections were there.
And on that same question, is there any advantage of using PSIs, everolimus and sirolimus, instead of mycophenolate because of their proposed anti-neoplastic actions?
Sir, I'm not sure about that. mTOR inhibitors, I did not come across any study which had used mTOR, so I'm not able to comment on that.
Jacob sir, anything to say? Mute answer.
Yeah, very impressive talk. In fact, after hearing the talk, I was having a small doubt whether the speaker is a nephrologist or an oncologist. It was covered very well. I think we can give a DM in both, both nephrology and oncology. It was covered both well. I had a small doubt. I mean, are all these cases done from KIMS Hospital? Is it KIMS data?
No, sir. It is a systematic review of all the published data, and the one case report that I mentioned was from PGI.
Okay. Because I thought it was from KIMS data. Yeah, good, very impressive, and I also learned a lot. Good talk. When Sadish said it's from, I had a feeling that it's from KIMS. I was about to congratulate Sadish and Praveen.
Oh. Not yet. Hopefully, we will be doing anyway. Congratulations.
Now that you have got her with you, probably you can have some myeloma transplant. So good. I think so. Overall, PGA, how many have you done so far? Myeloma transplants?
There was one multiple myeloma, one patient, and sir, another patient who was actually he was LCDD on biopsy, but no evidence of multiple myeloma, and he was transplanted similar, and he is doing fine.
I think Peter Morris just mentions that if you're doing a renal transplant in a malignancy, you're supposed to wait for 2 years. No, but you are mentioning you can go as early as 6 months.
So that is with respect to the solid organs, the solid organ malignancies. This is myeloma, and this is actually based on the case series and the case reports that are published so far. And since actually, I don't know which edition of Peter Morris, but these are like all the transplants in the past five years or so.
Which do you think is ideal? Like, I mean, going for a transplant after the stem cell, or do a transplant and go for a stem cell? Which is most the survival rate, which is the best?
So there is reduced risk of infections in patients who received renal transplantation after chemotherapy and stem cell transplantation. Like after the stem cell transplant and the patient was having very good partial remission or CR, then wait for about 6 to 12 months and then do a renal transplant. That would be the ideal to reduce the risk of relapse.
Yes. Any other questions or comments? Anyone? Okay. So thank you, Dr. Shabna, for that very eye-opening presentation. So let us hope that more of our myeloma patients can get transplanted in the future, especially with modern regimens in myeloma, which have changed the management actually. So I think we'll move on to the second presentation for today. And that is a case where we still don't have a proper diagnosis, but I'll ask Dr. Sean to express his views on that. Sean?
Okay, sir. So shall I share my screen?
Yes, yes.
Okay, am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good evening, respected teachers, dear colleagues. So today I am presenting rather an unusual case of TMA. So moving on to the history of the presenting illness, we had a 69-year-old gentleman who is a Gulf returning. He had no known prior history of any comorbid conditions. All that his complaints were that he had history of increased fatigue lasting for the past few months. He had later presented with hematuria and was showed by nearby hospital where he was evaluated and was found to have benign prostate hyperplasia as well. And at the same time, evaluation also revealed a serum creatinine of 3 milligram per deciliter, along with anemia and thrombocytopenia.
Hello?
Hello?
വൈകുന്നേരം 4:00 വരും.
Continue. Sean.
Okay, sir. And further evaluation and also had shown an M-band was known on the serum protein electrophoresis. Now, this was done outside before coming to our hospital. And a few days later, however, during his in-hospital stay, which was outside, he had developed sudden onset hemiplegia with altered sensorium, and in imaging had revealed an acute and chronic subdural hemorrhage. In view of the same, he had to undergo an emergency decompressive craniotomy for the same, and his delirium had persisted well into the post-operative period as well. Apart from that, there was no significant past history.
Sean, we can't hear you.
Hello.
Sean, are you there?
Hello. Sir. Hello.
Yeah. We can't hear you.
Hello. Am I audible, sir?
Yeah, now you're audible. Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, yeah. Continue, continue.
Hello. Am I audible? Okay.
Yeah, you can continue.
So there was no otherwise past history. Okay, sir. There was no history of diarrhea, fever, abdominal pain, no history of respiratory involvement, so renal-pulmonary syndrome was less likely. He had no prior history of hypertension, diabetes mellitus, coronary artery disease, prior renal disease, no definite prior history of malignancy. Hello. Hello.
Yeah, Sean. I think you should.
Hello.
Yeah. Can you keep your mobile in airplane mode
Hello.
and put on the.
Hello.
Yeah, okay, Sean.
Hello.
Continue. We can hear you. Hello, Sean.
Hello.
Dr. Sean, can you hear me? Dr. Sean, can you hear me? I think there's something wrong with his connection.
Yeah.
Hello. Hello.
Dr. Sean,
I'm
can you hear me?
very sorry. Yeah, ma'am. I'm very sorry for the snag.
No,
ma'am.
that's
Actually, I got a
fine.
call.
Is your mobile
Very sorry,
on?
ma'am. Yeah,
Is your
it's on my mobile. Yes, ma'am. It's on my mobile. I got a
Oh,
call.
you're
Very sorry.
presenting on your mobile.
Yeah.
Oh,
Actually,
so
I'm presenting
it
on my
gets
mobile.
disturbed when you get a call. Okay, that's fine.
Yes, ma'am. Very sorry, ma'am. Very sorry.
No,
Extremely
no
sorry.
problem.
I'll
Sean,
share the screen.
Wi-Fi?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Are you using Wi-Fi?
Yes, I'm using Wi-Fi, sir.
Then
It's
you
not
do
the
one thing.
mobile data.
Put your
Yes,
phone
sir.
into airplane mode, and then
Airplane
switch
mode. Sure, sir. Okay. Yes, sir. That will
and
be.
you don't get disturbed by in between calls. No? Okay.
Hello. Hello. Okay.
Yeah, you can hear.
Am I audible? Okay.
You are audible.
Okay.
Audible.
Okay.
Share
Okay.
screen.
So I'll just share my screen. Yes, sir. Yes. So I'll just open my presentation. Okay. Is it visible?
Yeah, fine.
Hello. Okay. 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 So on clinical examination, he was a thin-built gentleman who was disoriented with pallor present. There was no rash or any ecchymosis or purpura noted on examination. He was not in fluid. And BP was only mildly at 140/90. His initial laboratory screening indicated anemia, which was a hemolytic anemia, as evidenced by low HB and LDH of 298. Then inflammatory markers were also raised, CRP of 97.2, and his creatinine was 4.8, and a platelet of 28,000. USG abdomen had shown normally sized kidneys with raised echoes. And urine findings, apart from the fact that there was significant hematuria, protein was only plus and no cast noted. And blood cultures had revealed growth of Acinetobacter baumannii and Candida, mixed species of Candida. So basically here we have issues that he has hemolytic anemia and thrombocytopenia with raised inflammatory markers and history of renal dysfunction. Now his renal dysfunction had been declining ever since he had been, so it was a suggestion of a rapidly progressive renal failure along with neurological manifestations. So what are the possibilities? Now, firstly, we had considered the possible multiple myeloma. Given his age, then the fact that there was an M-band that was noted on serum protein electrophoresis done outside, and present anemia, raised DSR with an AG reversal also, which was present on the hepatic panel screen. We considered the possible multiple myeloma. Then there was a rapidly progressive renal failure, and TMA was also another possibility which will be considered. Now, as part of workup for rapidly progressive renal failure, we had done a biopsy for him. Now, as we can see in this slide, as we can see, there are basically RBCs which are noted in the arterioles. We can see, and then glomerulus as basically at the vascular pole. Basically, hello. Hello.
Oh, continue.
Carry on. Carry on.
Okay. So these are the, and then as you can see, even fibrin thrombi are present at the vascular pole in this glomerulus, but otherwise not very
typical findings. And this one clearly shows that there is basically necrosis and thrombi, which is present in the, and basically it seem to be occluding the arterial lumen as well in this picture. So basically in the biopsy, we can see there's more of a predominantly arterial involvement and glomerulus. Okay, and apart from the fact that there has been some ischemic collapse, not very significant involvement of the glomerulus has been noted. So this was a report that came out as the basically mesangiolisis and fibrin thrombi seen in the vascular pole with interstitial edema and patchy infiltrates in less than 10% of cortex with an acute tubular injury and intratubular RBC cast node, which was seen in the first line. Immunofluorescence showed positive for IgM and C3 staining in vessels, negative for IgA, C1q, kappa, and lambda. Electron microscopy also showed only subendothelial rarefaction few glomerular capillaries, no other dense deposits, fibrils, or microtubular structures. So, given all these findings, features were given of an acute thrombotic microangiopathy. And further evaluation also we carried out still. We were considering multiple myelomas of cause here. So, urine protein electrophoresis, all these findings or features suggestive of a polyclonal gammopathy rather than a monoclonal disease. As we can see, all the IgG, IgM, and IgA all have been noted to be elevated. There was no definite M-band also. Even light chain assay was also noted to be elevated, both kappa as well as lambda. Anti-complement factor X assay was found to be negative, and ADAM TS13 is 24% deficient. But then the thing here is that ADAM TS13, if it's less than 10, it is significant. But here it is 10 to 60, which is again not very specific, as it can be seen in many other conditions, malignancies and infections as well. And no inhibitor was also present. PET-CT, he had initially then we were looking for a possible focus of a malignant lesion. All that was there was a light salivary gland metabolic mass, which was a low-grade neoplasm, which and also there were no features of any extensive metastasis, lytic lesions, or any lymph node enlargement or any metabolic active lymph nodes. So leukemia, lymphoma, etc., and even a myeloma was also, looking at all these features, was also ruled out. Bone marrow refined biopsy showed hypercellular marrow scattered plasma cells with IHC CD138 highlighting plasma cells, and kappa and lambda again were positive to be seen in both in plasma cells. So as our course in his hospital is, initially he was delirious. He had and as an account of his delirium possibly, he also had developed a gross hematuria. He had basically pulled out his Foley's catheter, and in self-induced hematuria was present. And in view of severe anemia and ongoing bleeding as well, here we had to transfuse blood products as well on the day of admission. And given all these features, as mentioned before, bone marrow was done. And in view of his, now since he had a rapidly progressive renal failure picture, we had to treat him initially, and the suspicion of myeloma was also very high here. So given these considerations, we had actually started on one dose of bortezomib was given, and dexamethasone was also given for 3 days, but he did not show improvement. And also prior to undergoing biopsy, since his creatinine was also high, it was 10 at that time, he had undergone HD also, we had taken up for hemodialysis temporarily. And then he had also undergone 5 sessions of high volume plasmapheresis thereafter. Cultures around that time had come as positive, and he was started on voriconazole as well. Following the plasma exchange and institution of antibiotics, he actually began to show clinical improvement. So towards the time of discharge, his creatinine had come down to 2.3. And his neurological manifestation has also come down, and he had psychiatric manifestation, but then that was well managed and controlled with olanzapine and haloperidol. And at present, on subsequent follow-up in the OPD, his renal function has also shown nearly complete recovery with a creatinine of 1.2. So, so discussion is, as we are considering a TMA here, first and foremost, that we have to exclude other causes for hemolytic anemia with thrombocytopenia, especially secondary systemic infections, malignancies, then other autoimmune conditions also we have to exclude. And his clinical picture given also with the biopsy finding, all these things pointed to TMA. Now the next question was what type, or whether it was a primary or whether it was acquired, or which class of TMA that we could fit his disease into. So then from what we have gathered so far is that possibly there could be an acquired cause in this gentleman, and then we had to evaluate for the same as well. And there were, of course, other things, some things were definitely rolled out. For example, malignancy was rolled out. Myeloma, again, definitely rolled out. No history of drugs that could were present in this gentleman. APLA screen only showed a mild elevation antibodies, which was not very significant. And also, the ADAM TS levels is also not very severely deficient as well. So, given all these things into consideration, we are presently considering an infection-related TMA, definitely not the classical Shiga toxin related or the pneumococcal HUS. So possibly some infection related TMA. Now, as you can see here, this is the entire spectrum of the TMA syndromes that can occur. So given this entire spectrum of TMA, whether it is primary hereditary, unlikely, primary TMA acquired also seems less likely. So only possibly what we can consider here is that is other infection. In other infections, the pathogenesis of which how they cause TMA is also not entirely clear. So that is a thing we have to keep in mind. And here I have just shown a brief diagram showing depicting the pathogenesis of TMA, especially considering this case. Now, since he had a gram-negative bacillus, we are considering possibly the alternative pathway must have been activated. Now, activation of alternative pathway C3 will act as a cofighter with factor B, and this in turn brings about an amplification loop. Now, further amplification, when this sets into a series of this sets into a motion, that basically the C5 is converted to C5A, and then we have anaphylatosis C5B and C5A. This later forms the terminal pathway into formation of the membrane attack complex, that is C5B to C5-9. That in turn will produce platelet activation and in turn hemolysis. Now, there are some factors which will help to basically keep this unregulated complement loop activation in check, which are mainly factor F, factor H, factor I, and factor CD46. Now, when these factors in complement regulation are either maybe they may be deficient, or they may be a gain loss of function mutation, or they may be autoantibodies against these factors, is what will basically lead to unchecked complement activation in this case. And a study was done, a French study, a long study. It was a retrospective analysis of patients in 4 centers in France in 2009-2016. In their study, they had 564 patients with TMA, of which 6 were primary and 9 were deemed to be secondary. Now, the causes. Now, usually, surprisingly, the 3 main causes, that is TTP, atypical HUS, and Shiga toxin related HUS, from which most data has been available, considered only less than 10% of the total cases. A good number came from infections, pregnancies, drugs, and also malignancies. And one more thing we have to, which this study highlighted as well, more than half the subjects in the study had had multiple causes. So the factor whether infection or any was a triggering event also, we do not know in this case. And treatment also, 41% of SPTMA had received red cell transfusion, especially if they had presented with severe anemia at the time of presentation. And in TTP, 94% of them had received plasma infusion or plasma exchange. And here in this study also, 67, especially the atypical HUS patients, had been given eculizumab as well. Now, the outcome also what we have to keep in mind, the complication outcome has been varied for different causes. Malignancy-related TMAs had the worst outcome with respect to death, and whereas ST-HUS, of course, had an excellent outcome. Now, so far, the outcomes in all the cases put together, 15% became dialysis dependent, 11% had major cardiovascular events, and 4 had neurological complications, and 10% of the patients had also had death. So this is basically about TMA. So basically, what we are trying to say is that in our case, actually, the diagnosis is still known. We are still considering that possibly it may be a complement related TMA, which at present whether it manifested now is also uncertain, because usually they manifest when there is a hit or any trigger that will unmask the TMA, especially in a pregnancy or an infection, which may have been the case in this gentleman.
Yeah, thank you, Sean, for the case presentation. Now,
thank you, sir.
Sean would request everyone to ask questions and clarify doubts.
Okay, sir.
Anybody? Questions, comments, etc.
Sir, I have a doubt. So in this patient, if we think that it is infection related TMA, then plasma
Okay.
exchange would not be indicated. And if we think that, I think this anti-CFH antibody is negative in this patient.
Okay.
Is it negative?
Yes.
Anti-CFH antibody was negative. It was negative.
It is negative. So, with plasma exchange, you're not removing any antibodies, and in infection-related TMA, you don't do plasma exchange. The treatment is only treatment of infection and supportive management. And
Yes, it is.
so what was the indication for plasma exchange? And what
Plasma.
with plasma exchange, what were you trying to achieve? Like, you demonstrated that there was no antibody to remove, and you have yourself said that it was an infection related cause. So why did we go ahead with plasma exchange?
First of all, whether it is a definitely infectious related causes, we are not very sure on that. So possibly there may have been any autoantibodies against any of the complement inhibiting factors, and if these autoantibodies that have been removed by plasma exchange, it can very well explain his clinical response, I feel.
Anybody else? Questions?
Just a clarification about the plasma exchange. I think Sean, you mentioned high volume plasma exchange. So I think that is a
Yes, sir.
terminology used when it's like 10 to 12 liters of plasma is removed in like acute fulminant, like liver failure and all. Like, I don't think, did we do that?
No.
No,
It's
sir, no,
only
sir.
standard plasma exchange.
Standard plasma exchange. Yeah, I think that is a terminology that should be used carefully, high volume.
Yes,
and
sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
all. Okay.
Hello.
Sir.
Hello.
Satish.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was just among the causes of hemolytic uremic TMA, malignant hypertension is somewhere very low down in the list. But we recently had a patient, not recently, about 2 years back, we had a patient who came in with rapidly progressive renal failure and malignant hypertension. During the investigations, he turned out to have a TMA, and he required a very, very high dose of antihypertensive drugs for control. I think we used almost all the available drugs and spaced the timing in such a way that we could manage to control the hypertension. He is now on follow-up for the last 2.5 years. The antihypertensive requirement is still high, but the renal function has improved and he is holding on. Although it is rare, malignant hypertension is also a cause of TMA. Just wanted to make that
Yes,
comment.
sir.
Sean, did you have a thing on, did you put that also in your list of causes, malignant hypertension?
Yes, sir. That is also on the list of causes, sir. But for him, he didn't, in this case, sir, malignant hypertension seems to be unlikely, sir. He did not have prior hypertension also. And even at time of presentation, also BP was only marginally elevated. So,
Yeah. Why don't you stop screen sharing?
sir.
Now, I was not talking about this patient. I just wanted to make a comment to highlight the point that malignant hypertension can also cause TMA.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's correct. No, I was just asking whether he had put it in the list because I don't remember seeing it there. It's a big list.
That list showed 4%.
Okay.
In that
So,
last slide, malignant hypertension was in the side 4%.
Sean, stop screen sharing.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. The other thing about malignant hypertension is that there have been some recent studies have shown that patients in whom we diagnose malignant hypertension, many of them may have underlying complement mediated disorder. So even in those malignant hypertension, apparently we have to do a genetic study to prove that it is not a complement mediated issues. So that is actually creating more problems than solutions. Anybody else? Jacob, sir, anything? Sir, is not Vimla, madam? No comments from anyone. Just to say a few words about.
Can you hear me? Okay, in this clinical scenario, how will you exclude SLE, autoimmune hemolytic anemia, sepsis, all such things? How will you exclude?
Yeah. Basically, it's a presentation of TMA. SLE is possible, though it's less likely in a 70-year-old male. But if you want to rule out, you have to do this. If there's ANA, anti-DSANA, everything should be negative. And C3, in this patient, C3 was normal. So there is another clue. So possibly it is not a lupus related in this case. One of the problems we had was that, yeah.
Can you consider vasculitis in this patient because there is a CNS involvement? Also, other is there any vasculitis?
A picture of a TMA, it's more likely it could be a TTP for that matter. I don't know whether vasculitis can imitate the same picture of a TMA. It's unlikely because vasculitis has its own features. That means there will be mainly a vasculitis picture in the biopsy and not a thrombotic microangiopathy. So thrombotic microangiopathy as such is not a feature of vasculitis. The only vasculitis where it can occur is a catastrophic APLA. That's a form of vasculitis. But that is a very severe entity.
Then what about the autoimmune hemolytic anemia and all such things?
Yes, Sean, you have instance on autoimmune hemolytic anemia.
Autoimmune hemolytic anemia, sir, then basically Coombs test and all would have been positive, sir. So that's not positive here. So that also we cannot consider.
Will you consider sepsis as the real cause in this patient?
So sepsis, because basically sepsis we are considering the only whether it's a direct cause or as a result of indirectly as is, we cannot say. But mainly thing is he had leukocytosis and cultures are also there was a definite pathogen identified. So that is one reason we are considering sepsis in this scenario, sir.
Yeah. On the second, clarify all that. So actually, this patient was Kollam in one hospital, and then what happened there was that he was admitted for hematuria, and they treated him for hematuria, and they then while he was admitted there, he developed a stroke, and they did a CT, and it showed a subdural hematoma, and they had to do a deconstructive craniotomy. After that, he continued to have anemia, and they did the evaluation of anemia, and they found M-band positive. So they referred to the oncologist. Actually, he was admitted under oncology, and we were contacted because he had renal dysfunction. They didn't know why. So his creatinine when he came was around 3, 4, and then started shooting up like 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on. And he was in encephalopathy. We didn't know whether encephalopathy was due to the SDH, which surgery had been done, or whether it was something else. We didn't know. And then actually, in the initial part, because of the very strong consideration of myeloma, his M-band was positive. He had anemia. So he had raised ESR 140. So all those features were suggestive of myeloma, and oncologists actually fell for that and gave Dexona and bortezomib 1 dose. But then subsequently realized he didn't have myeloma at all because all the myeloma tests came as negative. And actually, despite the presence of anemia, thrombocytopenia, renal dysfunction, I didn't think of thrombotic microangiopathy initially because I was also going behind the myeloma. So it goes the importance of keeping an open mind about the biopsy. Actually put us back on the right track because we did the biopsy early, and we found. Then we thought again when we saw the TMA, we thought it was a myeloma related TMA, and therefore we started plasmapheresis. That is the first thing. At the end of it all, we had only a diagnosis of TMA. We had sepsis. Definitely there was Acinetobacter and Candida in the blood. So sepsis was there. There was thrombotic microangiopathy and nothing else. So no other cause for thrombotic microangiopathy. So if you consider primary complement-mediated abnormality for him, that 70 years is unlikely to manifest. So overall, and not only that, after the plasmapheresis, after the control of infection, he completely became normal. Everything disappeared. So that is why after everything is over, we make a post hoc diagnosis of infection-related TMA. So it is not actually a primary diagnosis, but it's a diagnosis of default for us. Of course.
So what was the platelet count? Do you remember in this patient?
Yeah, it was
28,000,
and then came down to 14,000.
How did you manage to do a biopsy?
No, we gave platelets.
You transplanted platelets and SSP were given.
Because we were wondering what's happening, we didn't know. So we did the biopsy with by improving the platelet. Actually, after giving Dexona, the platelet count also improved a little bit. It came up to above 50,000. So that
because
is also,
I was like, when I'm like, okay, you're going for a diagnosis without biopsy. And then I see this biopsy picture, I'm like, okay.
Actually, that platelet count is also very, because we have seen a lot of myeloma, but none of the myeloma we see such a low platelet count. So I was thinking whether it's a severe myeloma just totally infiltrated the bone marrow and caused thrombocytopenia, etc. So I was not able to explain the thrombocytopenia. So, but when the biopsy came, it became very something like hitting on the head. How can you miss that?
And even the LDH was not very high, was it?
LDH was only 280, some just about normal. It was not very high.
Yeah, that was also surprising. Anyway, it would have been very difficult to make this diagnosis clinically. LA.
Yeah, but thinking back, we should have made the diagnosis, no? Because anemia, thrombocytopenia, renal failure. If a medical student doesn't make the diagnosis, you'll probably fail that first.
You know, that's the advantage of being on the better side of the table.
But yeah, I was not presenting this case to people, I might have something like that.
Yeah.
Now we can use the gel form, no, for high risk biopsies. So that is something that I think we underuse. So after the biopsy, immediately put gel form at that site of the biopsy, if you have that sort of facility. That is useful in such high risk cases, especially in ICU and on ventilator. We did a biopsy, so immediately after, like an ANCA vasculitis, we suspected an ANCA vasculitis, But after biopsy, immediately you put like gel foam and all. So
I've seen thoracic surgeons use it, but I was not aware that it was being used for renal biopsy.
Yeah, we can do that actually. The bleeding incidence is.
Are you using it?
Yeah.
Okay. That's nice.
I think, Sean, there's a question from brain plasma cell percentage in the bone marrow. What is the plasma cell percentage?
It was 10 to 20%.
Actually, it was plasma cell percentage also a little bit high, 10 to 20%. But subsequently, we did the analysis of the plasma cells and they were both kappa and lambda positive. So it was not monoclonal. That was the last straw. Actually, the initial kappa lambda free light chain initial value was 301 for kappa and 200 and something for lambda. On follow-up, after 2 months, we repeated that and came as 175. Still high, but both were high. So one thing he definitely does not have is myeloma.
Shall we move on to the general body? I think everybody must be hungry. It's already 9:20.
Yeah.
Satish, one question to Sean. Sean, what is the definition of malignant hypertension?
In the Ponnu Sare, this is not a DMX. You are attacking.
Yes.
Yeah, no, let him answer. I think he will answer.
Malignant hypertension is accident hypertension in the presence of end organ damage. Sir. There should be evidence of end organ damage.
What's your reference?
That is not very correct. No? It's more.
Okay, I'm leaving Manju.
He'll probably read up and tell you tomorrow, Sadish sir.
Better.
A little finer definition.
It's very relevant.
Okay, sir. Okay. Yes, sir.
So Manju, what's the general body?
Actually, there are no major, there's nothing much to be discussed in the general body. Only thing is there was this doubt because we don't have that sister center talks anymore. That was the confusion that Dr. Satish was talking about. Because I assumed that we were going to have it alternate months. So now, what does everybody feel? Should we have it every month or should we just stick to alternate months? That is virtually the only.
Have it monthly itself. Let us meet at least. No? It's good.
Okay. No, that's fine. Every month we can organize something. Jacob sir, I think you should encourage your PGs also to present because they have not been presenting for the past 1 year since last March. Jacob sir, are you on?
If everyone can their video, switch on their video, it will be nice for the general body.
Yeah, I think Jacob sir is not there. Is anybody else from Susan madam? പ്രസന്റ് അവിടുന്ന് ഇപ്പം സിസ്റ്റർ സെന്ററിന്റെ കുറെ നിങ്ങൾ പ്രസന്റ് ചെയ്തു, ബട്ട്
Yeah, we presented a lot.
I know. So I feel very bad to ask you also.
Yeah, we presented a lot for the. Yeah, but we can present one case next time. We will try. Because we are faculty only, for presenting. That is the problem.
That's what. Because medical college, PGs have been taken off for 1 year now.
You can ask some of the medical college PGs to present that. Next time.
I have to ask them.
Yeah, Jacob sir, Jacob sir, Noble.
Jacob sir, ഭക്ഷണം കഴിക്കാൻ പോയി.
Noble ഉണ്ടല്ലോ,
Noble leave ചെയ്തു. He's no longer there.
Vinitha എവിടെയാ? Vinitha completely.
Vinitha has not been attending for a while now.
അല്ല, she is our treasurer, no?
Yeah, she'll come only when there are matters of
money.
Money
matters.
Money matters. അത് തന്നെ.
Next time you can ask for the accounts, then she will come.
So we'll have it every month, and I think PGs can be.
Rotate it is not a compulsion.
Compulsion, but if possible.
But yeah.
Medical college. So
students rotate.
What about World Kidney Day? World Kidney Day. Are we planning any program?
World Kidney Day എന്താണ് പരിപാടി എന്നുള്ളതാണ് അടുത്തത്. That was also there. Sorry.
We are not doing any programs outside yet. We can't do any walk or anything like that. Probably we might get arrested. So
can somebody do something through FM? Because FM, I think it's possible to do something.
Yeah.
നമ്മള് ഒരു പ്ലാൻ ചെയ്യുന്ന പ്രോഗ്രാംസ് നമ്മള് സ്കൂൾ കുട്ടികൾക്ക് വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് ഒരു എസ്എ കോമ്പറ്റീഷൻ നടത്താനായിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു പ്ലാൻ ഉണ്ട്. അപ്പൊ നമ്മളത് IAPയും നമ്മുടെ ട്രിവാൻഡ്രം നെഫ്രോളജി ക്ലബും നമ്മുടെ ഡിപ്പാർട്ട്മെന്റും കൂടെ ജോയിൻ ചെയ്തിട്ട് ട്രിവാൻഡ്രത്തെയോ കേരളത്തിലെയോ ഓൾ ഓവർ ഇംഗ്ലീഷ് ആസ് വെൽ ആസ് മലയാളം ഒരു ദ കിഡ്നീസ് ഇൻ ഹെൽത്ത് എന്നുള്ള ഒരു ടോപ്പിക് എടുത്തിട്ട് അത് ചെയ്യാമെന്ന് ഇങ്ങനെ വിചാരിക്കുന്നു. അതിന് വേണ്ടിയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു formulating. That is one thing. Second thing, what we were planning to do is to do a small 2-hour CME program for nephrology and pediatric fraternity. അത് നമ്മുടെ ഒരു പ്ലാൻ ആണ്. ഈ രണ്ട് കാര്യങ്ങളാണ് ഞങ്ങളുടെ ഡിപ്പാർട്ട്മെന്റിൽ നിന്ന് വി ആർ ജസ്റ്റ് ട്രൈങ് ടു ഡു ഫോർ ദ വേൾഡ് കിഡ്നി ഡേ. പിന്നെ ബാക്കി എല്ലാരും കൂടെ പ്ലാൻ ചെയ്ത് എന്തെങ്കിലുമൊക്കെ ചെയ്യാം നമുക്ക്.
സതീഷ് സർ, നമ്മളാണ് ഒന്നും ചെയ്യാത്ത അഡൾട്ട്, not doing anything. So I think we I am like, one foot here and the other foot there. So
നമുക്ക് ശരിക്കും പറഞ്ഞാൽ
both feet firmly planted on one side. So
ലിവിങ് വിത്ത് കിഡ്നി ഡിസീസ് എന്നുള്ളതാകുമ്പോൾ നമ്മുടെ കിഡ്നി പേഷ്യൻസിന് വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് എന്തെങ്കിലും കൂടെ ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റിയ അതും കൊള്ളാമായിരിക്കും. വാട്ട് വി ക്യാൻ ഡു ഫോർ ദം, ഹൗ ദേ ആർ കോപ്പിംഗ് വിത്ത് ദ കിഡ്നി ഡിസീസ് ആൻഡ് ഹൗ ദേ ആർ ഗോയിങ് വിത്ത് ദാറ്റ് എന്നുള്ളത്. ഇപ്പം ഒരു ഡ്യൂറേഷൻ ഓഫ് കിഡ്നി ഡിസീസ് മോർ ദാൻ 5 years ഉള്ള പേഷ്യൻസ്, ഹൗ ദേ ഹാവ് ഡൺ ഓൾ ദീസ് ഇയേഴ്സ്, ഹൗ ദേ ഹാവ് മാനേജ് ദംസെൽസ് എന്നുള്ള ഒരു രീതിയിൽ ഒരു സംതിങ് ഇഫ് വി ക്യാൻ പ്ലാൻ, we will also know how they manage with their disease and how they live.
That's true.
But what is the forum to do that will be a problem, because COVID aanu namukku get together onnu angane plan cheyano anganonnu pattunnilla, and oru computer savvy or virtual platform il etratholam avarku join cheyan pattu ennulladum, that is another concern. But I was just thinking, that is the logo this time, that it is living with kidney disease. അപ്പോൾ പിന്നെ ആ രീതിയിലുള്ളതും കൂടെ ആലോചിക്കണം.
കൊല്ലത്തെ ടീം എന്താണ്?
അതാണ് സാറേ, ലിവിങ് വിത്ത് കിഡ്നി ഡിസീസ്.
Yeah, frame the suggestion, drawing competition or something like for dialysis or transplant patients, for them or for their children.
അല്ല, പല ഏജ് ഗ്രൂപ്പിലുള്ളത് നമുക്ക് നോക്കാം. പീപ്പിൾ മേ ബി ഹാവിങ് ടാലന്റ് ഉള്ള അഡൽട്ടും കാണും. സോ ഫോർ ദി children as well as for adolescents, children and adolescents as one group, or children as a separate group, adolescent, young adult, അങ്ങനെ വല്ലതും പ്ലാൻ ചെയ്ത് നമ്മൾ അത്. പക്ഷെ എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നു we have to take the idea will have to be given to the public ഫോറത്തിൽ കൊടുത്തെങ്കിലേ നമുക്ക് നല്ലൊരു രീതിയിലുള്ള പാർട്ടിസിപ്പേഷൻ കിട്ടത്തുള്ളൂ.
മോഹൻദാസ് ഒരു പോയട്രി കോമ്പറ്റീഷൻ ഓർഗനൈസ് ചെയ്താലോ?
പോയിട്രി കോമ്പറ്റീഷനും ഓർഗനൈസ് ചെയ്യാം സാറേ. സംതിങ് ലൈക്ക് ദാറ്റ്. മോഹൻദാസ് അതിനുള്ള ഇനീഷ്യേറ്റീവ് എടുത്താൽ.
Poetry about living with
kidney disease.
ഇന്ന് രാവിലെ ഡയാലിസിസ് കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ട് ഒരു ലേഡി
പറയുന്നതിനേക്കാളും ഒരു ചെറിയ പോയട്രി പറയുകയാണെങ്കിൽ
ഇന്ന് ആക്ച്വലി ഒരു ലേഡി ഡയാലിസിസ് കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ട് മുടിയൊക്കെ ഇങ്ങനെ ചീവി ഒരു സെൽഫി എടുക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. ഡയാലിസിസ് റൂമിന്റെ പുറത്ത് ഡയാലിസിസ് കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ട് വന്നിട്ട്.
അല്ല, എപ്പോഴും ഞാൻ ആലോചിക്കും നമുക്കൊരു എന്താ പറയേണ്ടത്, ഇപ്രാവശ്യം തന്നെ ഇന്റർനാഷണൽ സൊസൈറ്റി നമ്മളോട് ചെറിയ ഫിലിം എന്തെങ്കിലും ഉണ്ടാക്കി കൊടുക്കാനൊക്കെ ഒരു ഡെഡ് ലൈൻ ഒക്കെ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. വി വെർ നോട്ട് ഏബിൾ ടു ഡു സച്ച് തിങ്സ്. അതിനും എന്താ പറയേണ്ടത്, ആ ഒരു ഐഡിയയും നല്ലതാണ്.
Mohandas പറഞ്ഞപ്പോൾ എനിക്കൊരു ഐഡിയ വന്നു. One is photography competition for topic with kidney disease. So we can ask dialysis patients, transplant patients to participate. Dialysis patients will be better because you can put a notice in the dialysis room that we have a photography competition. And
നമ്മുടെ ലോങ്സ്റ്റ് സർവൈവിംഗ് ഡയാലിസിസ് പേഷ്യന്റ് ആരാന്ന് കണ്ടുപിടിക്കാൻ പറ്റുമോ? ലോങ്സ്റ്റ് സർവൈവിംഗ് പേഷ്യന്റ് ഓൺ ഡയാലിസിസ്.
I have a patient who started on 2003.
That would be the longest.
Yeah, that
18 years. That is probably the longest.
സാറിന് കാണുമായിരിക്കും, കാശ് സാറിന് അതിലും ലോങ് ഡ്യൂറേഷൻ കാണും.
Recently we lost him.
Okay.
Recently we lost him. That was Andhra start ചെയ്ത ഉടനെ ഉള്ള ഡയാലിസിസ് ആണ്. That is 2007.
Okay.
1,600 sessions of dialysis. 2003 ആകുമ്പോഴത്തേക്കും 2000 കഴിഞ്ഞ് കാണും. Number of dialysis.
Oh yes, lost count.
He passed away recently. ബാക്കിയുള്ളതെല്ലാം 8-10 വർഷങ്ങളൊക്കെ ഉള്ളൂ. Because we started in 2007 only.
This man is my oldest surviving patient. So he started at the age of 29 at that time. So he's still only in the 40s.
അപ്പൊ നമുക്ക് ട്രിവാൻഡ്രം നെഫ്രോളജി ക്ലബിന്റെ സൈഡിൽ നിന്ന് വേണമെങ്കിൽ that patient can be called and
Yeah.
പക്ഷെ എവിടെ വിളിക്കും സാറേ?
All India, Zoom. അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഓൾ കേരള എല്ലാം നോക്കണം, ആരെങ്കിലും ഉണ്ടോ എന്ന് നോക്കണം.
All Kerala വേണം, നമ്മൾ ട്രിവാൻഡ്രം നെഫ്രോളജി ക്ലബ്.
അല്ല, അപ്പൊ എന്റെ പിള്ളേർക്കും കൂടെ കൊടുക്കണം. 5 വർഷമായിട്ടൊക്കെ ഡയാലിസിസിൽ ഇരിക്കുന്ന, നമ്മുടെ മൃതസഞ്ജീവനിൽ രജിസ്റ്റർ ചെയ്തിട്ട് ഇങ്ങനെ വെയിറ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്ന കുട്ടികളൊക്കെ ഉണ്ട്. 5 വർഷമൊക്കെ. And so
shall we do something, Satish sir? What we'll do is we put up a request in the general group for suggestions. We'll amalgamate everything and then probably within a week we shall plan something. കഴിഞ്ഞ വർഷം ഇതുപോലെ പ്ലാൻ ചെയ്തതാണ് ഒരു വലിയ ബോംബിൽ അവസാനിച്ചത്.
ഫ്ലോപ്പായി. നമ്മൾ നടക്കാമെന്നൊക്കെ വിചാരിച്ച്
അതെ, നമ്മള് ഷൂസും കെട്ടി ഇരിക്കുവായിരുന്നു. പക്ഷെ കൂടെ പൊട്ടിത്തെറിയായി പോയി.
ടീഷർട്ടും ഒക്കെ മേടിച്ചു, നമ്മൾ പെർമിഷനും ഒക്കെ എടുത്തു. അത് കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ട് എല്ലാം കൂടെ
10th ഇപ്പൊ എല്ലാം അങ്ങ് ഇതായി പോയത്. സപ്പോസ് ബി ഓൺ 12th and 10th. അതുകൊണ്ട് but even then let us keep our fingers crossed and
ഇല്ല, നമ്മളെ വെർച്വൽ ആവുമ്പോൾ പ്രോബ്ലം ഇല്ല മഞ്ജു. ഇഫ് എവരിതിങ് ഈസ് വെർച്വൽ.
അതെ, ഇഫ് എവരിതിങ് ഈസ് വെർച്വൽ there is no problem. ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞത് നമ്മൾ ഈ പ്ലാൻ ചെയ്തിട്ട് anyway, let's see. Shall we put it in the gel because there are very few people here now. 12 പേര് 13 പേരേ ഉള്ളൂ ഇപ്പോ whoever is logged in.
അല്ല, ഈ പറഞ്ഞതുപോലെ ജനറൽ ബോഡിക്ക് എല്ലാരും നിക്കണമെന്നൊക്കെ പ്രസിഡന്റ് അങ്ങ് ഒരു ഓർഡർ ഇറക്കണം. ഇറങ്ങി പോകരുതെന്ന്.
Short of shooting somebody, it's very difficult to.
ജേക്കബ് സാറിനോട് പിള്ളേരെ കൊണ്ട് കേസ് പ്രസന്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറഞ്ഞപ്പോ സാറ് കഴിക്കാൻ പോയി കേട്ടോ. സാറ് പോയി.
അതെ, ജേക്കബ് സാർ ഉണ്ടോ അവിടെ?
സാറ് മ്യൂട്ട് ചെയ്തിരിക്കുക, വീഡിയോയും ഇല്ല.
ജേക്കബ് സാർ ഇടയ്ക്കൊന്ന് പ്രത്യക്ഷപ്പെട്ടായിരുന്നു. I'll call him personally. Anyway, അപ്പൊ നമുക്ക് അങ്ങനെ ചെയ്യാം. We'll put up a request in the general group, wait for suggestions and put everything together within 1 week.
Okay.
അല്ലേ?
Okay.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Satish, you can organize Professor Ramdas Memorial CME this month through virtual or any other platform.
Yeah, that is a good idea. Actually thinking maybe a good idea. The only problem with that is that nowadays so many Zoom meetings, we are not getting audience for any of them.
But we can cut short the program maybe virtual 2-3 hours.
You know, sir, what is being done is you organize it on 2 days, 5 to 8 p.m.
Yeah, that
Not the
Yeah.
entire day as we used to do it.
Yeah, but
So 2 or 3 hours a day on a Saturday and Sunday, I think would be perfect.
yeah. And Ramdas Pishardi sir memorial oration ഒക്കെ എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നു NAK will also be joining. അപ്പൊ നമുക്ക് ആളിനെ കിട്ടും. പക്ഷെ സ്പീക്കർ ആരാണെന്നുള്ളത് നേരത്തെ ഡിസൈഡ് ചെയ്യണം. There is not much time
And
left.
then if you're getting somebody from abroad, you have to, you know, watch out for the time difference.
Yeah.
If നമ്മളുടെ ഇവിടെ suppose we say 5 p.m. to 8 p.m., it might be like midnight or like, you know, early morning for them. So I think we may have
അല്ല
to take
നമുക്ക്
into consideration
നമുക്ക്
that.
എന്താ പറയേണ്ടത് ഇന്റർനാഷണൽ വേണോ നമുക്ക് നാഷണൽ തന്നെ so many good speakers are there, why don't we go for national faculty?
We can get plenty of national.
Yeah, national faculty, so many of them are there who are very good.
No, why I said this is
We are planning fluid and alkaline base symposium throughout. That was the theme for the Ramdas Pishardi Memorial CME, but it didn't work out. Finally, we had to cancel everything.
no, so let's do it this year.
Yeah,
can do
we
it.
can do it.
That you can plan for April. Then that will be ideal. By the time we get it.
The usual, like much.
And one advantage this time, we don't need any money because
Yeah,
Zoom,
true.
No flight
Other than
tickets.
Zoom is already there.
no hotel charges, nothing.
Huh.
അതിനൊക്കെ കഴിഞ്ഞ പ്രാവശ്യം നമ്മൾ മോഹൻദാസും എല്ലാവരും ഇരുന്ന് ഇങ്ങനെ തലമുഖച്ച് ആലോചിച്ച് ഒന്നും കിട്ടിയില്ല.
അല്ല ഇപ്രാവശ്യം നമുക്ക് കാശ് വേണ്ടല്ലോ, കാശ് വേണ്ടാത്തോണ്ട് നമ്മൾ കാശ് മേടിക്കണ്ട. നമ്മൾ
ആളിനെ കിട്ടാനാണ് പ്രയാസം.
കാശ് അങ്ങോട്ട് കൊടുക്കേണ്ടി വരുമോ?
ആള് വേണ്ടി.
ശരി അപ്പൊ
ഓക്കെ
Okay.
ഇത് രണ്ടും പ്ലാൻ ചെയ്യാം. പ്ലാൻ ചെയ്യാം, then വേൾഡ് കിഡ്നി ഡേ പ്ലാനും ചെയ്യാം.
Okay, bye then. Bye.
Okay then.
Bye. Good night.
Good night.